I've decided on a white box cloth for the damper guides, the damper guide rails, which is basically that's what it's going to look like when they're all done. These are the damper wires. The damper head's going to be on there. The dampers, as in the things that stop the string ringing, so they come down like that. These rails just basically slot those in like that, so that they'll move up and down, and the dampers will slide up and down easy onto the strings. What you do is you just a strip of felt or cloth, box cloth, triangle up through the bottom, tiny dab of glue on the bottom. Some people don't even bother gluing on, but I like to make sure they don't not going to go anywhere. Pull it all the way through, saw it off at the top, and then they end up looking like that. And then damp guide, push that through there like that. Now at this stage I want it to be a touch on the tight side, because when you put the dampers on and you start waggling them out, they do tend to loosen up a little bit. If they don't loosen up enough, I'll just what I'll end up doing is just reaming them slightly, or easing them, so that that slides up and down with no resistance at all. And you can hear at the moment that going down there. You can hear that there's a little bit, but that's a good thing. So yes, then I'll flatten them off again at the top, and that's the guides done. Now that I've done those, and I've been showing you a little bit about doing the damper guides, I thought the next stage would probably be a good idea to do the actual damper heads themselves, which are all nicely laid out here at the moment. Look, I think I did a video about putting that green felt on the back, but I said we couldn't do the actual damper felt, the white bit, on just yet, because we had to calculate the frame to see which if it was still alright in terms of how it was scaled. We did do a bit of changes actually, so it's a good job I did wait. Basically on a piano, if you remember, the very low notes of a piano down at the very bass end will only have one string per note. Then it changes to bichords, which is 2 strings per note, and then the rest of the piano will have 3 strings per note. I'll explain a little bit more about why that is when we go into stringing the piano itself, but for now what it means is that the notes down at the very bass end of the piano, the monos, will need some of this felt, which is called clip. And the string, the actual single string, fits inside that clip there. That clip glues onto the head on that edge, onto there, and then that fits in there. So I'm doing that one first. We buy them in strips. You can get them in sets as well. We do sets occasionally where they're already pre-cut in sets. This one we're doing in strips. That's what the bichords look like. As you can see, it's a wedge shape. And on that one, the string sits, if it's a bichord, the string will sit either side of that wedge, like that. From there, the first of the trichords, you can actually see that is split wedge. So it'll have a string on that side, a string on that side, and a string down the middle. Flats I will come on to in another video, because first of all I'm going to put these on. Now in general, what I tend to look for when I'm sticking these on is what you'll see is, if you look at a damper on a piano, there'll be felt on the back edge and there'll be felt on the front edge, and then there'll be a gap in the middle. So what I've got to do is I've got to slice these up so that there is roughly, as a good rule of thumb, around just under a third of the whole length of the body of the damper head goes there, and then another third of felt will go there, and then there'll be a third missing in the middle. Only as a rough measurement, anyway. But that's generally how it looks. And as you can see, they're tapered. So what I've had to do is run a few calculations to tell me, and also how many monos we've actually got on this piano, because it's different for each piano, how many bichords we've got, how many split wedge we're going to have, which is going to be slightly more than the original piano had, half and half, which is half split wedge and half flat. Now, I said, didn't I, earlier, I'm going to come on to flats later, and then the remaining one is flat. Now, I'll go into detail about the flats later, but for now, because as you can see, there's a bit of a calculation to do on the flats. But for now, that's what I'm going to do. So, what I do is I take my clip felt, I go over to the guillotine, which I've already set up to roughly about 1/3 of the overall length of the damper. Line that up in there, pull the guillotine down, which I'm not going to do one-handed because I value my fingers, and then once I've got little pieces of it, I will glue them onto there. Animal glue, of course, and you've got to make sure that they line up very precisely, because if they don't, the string won't carry on. The string will carry on ringing. Video time again.
Video time's jolly good.
I've just been explaining about split wedge versus clip versus all the other stuff, and I really ought to film a bit about you doing them legs at some point to show you what you've been doing, because we've not really done any video about them legs, have we yet?
No,
so
just in case it didn't turn out right.
So that's a video for another day, but for now I'm doing these dampers. So there you go, that's about all that explained. I'll get onto flats when I get round to the flat felt, but for now that's what I'm doing, and I'll show you a few when I've got them stuck on. Now, what do you think of these? How are these looking now? That's looking quite nice, isn't it? They're all on. Look like dampers again. So, that's good. There's the clips, look. Wedge. Split wedge. My phone will focus on that. Yeah, split wedge. Now, the difference between split wedge and flat, because you can, when you get up to 3 chords on a piano, you can either have the split wedge or the flats. Now, the split wedges are a pain to set up, they take a lot longer, but they do dampen the strings better. So, on a piano where you've got the longer string lengths, as you can see we've got the grand piano here, the longer the strings with the 3 notes, they're going to take a lot more to dampen the strings fully. So you tend to use, on the long strings, the split wedge, because it'll damp better. Then as you get closer to the top, you change to flats, because basically once you get to shorter strings, it doesn't take much to stop the strings ringing up there, and flats are a lot easier to set up. So basically it's flats from there up. So what I'm doing now is the flat part, which is the ones that I've still got left to do. And also, to make an even transition between the two, you sometimes do half and half as well. So I've got a section of half split wedge, half flats. And then I've got one that's total flats. Now, what we do on the flats, because this is the material down here for the flat, it's the damper felt is just on a strip. We've got to cut it into a little fine strip and a little fine strip. But what we do is, because there's a taper on the dampers, on the heads, we also taper the thickness of the felt. So I've calculated all the measurements out. I need 21 pieces in total. The length of each of the damper heads is 1 centimetre, so I need 21 centimetres that way. In order to get roughly about 1/3 between there, a 1/3 gap in the middle and a 1/3 that side, I need 15, 12, 12, 15. So I cut across that, and that will give me the taper. Obviously, once that's cut from the strip down there, what you then need to do is flip the top layer around like that, so you've got 15, 15, and then it's running down to 12. That's a really rough explanation, but it's the best I can think of off the top of my head right now. It's better to show you once the job's been done. So that's what I'm doing now, and I'll show you the completed thing when I've cut and glued all those on.